family get together at the end of the 20th century.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do one large family portrait. No hiding at the back, come to the sides.
It's a diamond wedding anniversary. Sheila's been married to Peter for 60 years.
Kiss the wife. Go on then, kiss her. Go on.
Who's doing this, me or you?
In Sheila's extended family, there's a university lecturer, a chip shop owner, and even a millionaire.
If you could all smile as good as Joyce, we'd be gone.
This is the Carpenter family, and over the last 100 years they've had more than their fair share of drama, secrets and scandals, loves and losses, triumphs and tragedies. And this is the story of the 20th century told through the lives of this one English family.
That's lovely.
100 years ago, Charles Carpenter, the son of a blacksmith, met Alice Bale, a domestic servant. After a 7-year courtship, they married and had 12 children, 10 girls and 2 boys. A huge family, even by the standards of the day.
The neighbours used to say Charles Carpenter only had to hang his trousers over the end of the bed, and along comes another carpenter.
Well, they kept on having sex. They perhaps liked it. Well, well, who doesn't?
Today, 4 of their daughters are still alive. Madge, the eldest, is now 92.
My mother always called me the devil's own because she said she never knew what I was going to do next. And it was usually something that caused trouble or was awkward.
Joyce was child number 6. At 18, she got into trouble of a different sort.
His mum and dad went away, and we spent the weekend in their bed. Yeah. That's where it happened.
If Joyce was the black sheep of the family, Sheila, the 8th child, was the dutiful daughter who joined the Brownies when she was 7.
An elf learns the little rhyme, "This is what we do as elves, think of others, not ourselves." And that's been my motto, I would say, for the rest of my life.
Aline was the baby of the family. Now 75, she's a different generation from her older sisters.
I seemed to be on my own more because I was quiet and I didn't dare say boo to a goose. So sometimes I wasn't brought into the conversation.
The family lived in Nottingham, a thriving city at the beginning of the century. Charles, the father, worked at the post office training to be a telegraph engineer. He was soon doing well, and in 1911 the family moved to a 2-up, 2-down in Hayden Road, a respectable working-class area of Nottingham. The Carpenter children went to the local parish school.
School wasn't particularly interesting. I learnt very quickly and got bored very quickly.
Madge sailed through school, but for her younger sister Joyce, it was a different story.
I was never top of the class. I used to hold the class up. But, of course, I wasn't a favourite to my dad for that. You see, he liked to have brainy kids, I think.
Empire Day was held every year on May the 24th. All over the country, school children saluted the Union Jack and celebrated the power and wealth of the British Empire. But even as little girls, Madge and Joyce were different.
Empire Day was quite an occasion. It was really lovely. I enjoyed it, and I think most children did.
I didn't like it at all, Empire Day. All the schools were arranged in patterns all over the place.
All the girls used to wear lovely white cotton dresses and always a big sash with a great big bow at the back.
It was sort of taken for granted that we were all enthusiastic about it, and we weren't. We were dragooned into this drilling and massing and arranging and so on, and all of us looking silly.
Classroom discipline was rigidly enforced. The cane, the strap, or a slug round the ear was a daily occurrence.
Kids were quite often caned, and they went out and they held out their hands, and that was it. And my blood used to boil. I don't know how they could stand it.
I had the strap for talking, but just says it's hurt me more than it's hurt you. I thought, well, well, it was punishment, you see, we accepted it.
But Madge had a different attitude. And one day, an incident at school set her on a totally different path from her sisters.
I was fetched out to be caned in front of the class because I'd dropped an ink blot on my exercise book, and I put my hands behind my back and refused.
Madge ran home to her mother. Even then, corporal punishment was controversial, especially amongst working-class parents. Alice Carpenter went straight to see the headmaster.
He said I'd got to go back and be caned. And my mother said, no, not on any account. I'm going to send her to a decent school.
Madge was sent to a private school, where the standards of teaching were much higher. Education was driving a wedge between her and Joyce.
She was always felt a bit superior. She mixed with a different type of person to what I mixed with. I hadn't got the brain she had.
Joyce was a pudding when she was a kid, a comfortable pudding. What she aspired to do or to be, I never had any idea.
But despite their growing differences, the girls still shared one childhood pleasure.
Old Man Grundy, we called him, kept a little shop, which wasn't very clean, but he got everything that kids wanted. Sugar pigs, long licorice sticks, spoons, and a fizzy thing with a licorice in it, and we used to buy those.
I bought a bar of Sharp's creamy toffee with my tuppence. I used to love that toffee. I can still remember it all these years afterwards. Sharp's creamy toffee, yeah.
I can remember cartwheeling all down Hayden Road, all the way home. They were happy days.
But the sisters' world was about to be disrupted. In the first 16 months of the First World War, 2.5 million men volunteered for active service. Young men were encouraged to join up in pals brigades with friends and workmates from the same town. Men who had lived and worked side by side enlisted together, and many were doomed to die together on the Western Front. But now with 5 children, Charles Carpenter decided he should stay at home. But it wasn't long before Nottingham itself saw action. In 1915, the Germans started bombing Britain's cities from their huge airships.
I remember seeing the Zeppelins, great big fat lovely cigar-shaped things, Yes, that they went over and crowds of Nottingham folk came out into the street. My father used to go outside and stand and watch, but my mother put mattresses on the kitchen table and us underneath.
No one expected the war to last more than a year, but as it dragged on and casualties mounted, the government launched a campaign to keep the number of recruits up. Patriotic posters played on the shame of cowardice, and women were urged to persuade their menfolk to enlist. Even fathers were targeted. In November 1915, Charles Carpenter left his wife and children to join up.
He was at the front in communications. All the time he was out there. He never spoke about his war experiences, except that he'd been standing talking to his friend, and the friend was shot dead. Dad was absolutely unharmed, and the bullet that killed him, Dad had, and he made it into this brooch.
Back home, the war had sparked a more liberal attitude. Give the boys a good time was the motto for soldiers on leave, and the possibility of never seeing their sweethearts again made some young women more open to sexual encounters. The number of illegitimate births rose sharply, and newspapers carried articles on the scandal of war babies.
Whatever opinions people may hold about the bastardy laws or illegitimacy at ordinary times, this is a matter of emergency.
In France, soldiers like Charles Carpenter read of the moral panic and became suspicious of what their wives back home were getting up to. In May 1916, Alice Carpenter gave birth to her 7th child, a son, and Charles came home on leave.
When my father came home, Bill was outside in his pram with one of my sisters, and he said, "Whose is that baby?" And she said, "It's yours, it's our Bill." And Dad didn't see how Bill could be his. He had a lot of yellow curls and very blue eyes, and we were all black-haired and brown-eyed. He was the odd one out.
Well, poor mother had had so many babies that I'm quite sure that she hadn't had an extra relationship anywhere.
It doesn't reflect very nicely on Dad. And my poor old mother had enough to put up with without suspicions of this sort.
His looks in later life proved that he was a real carpenter, but I think perhaps that was always in the back of Father's mind.
He and Bill were at loggerheads nearly all Bill's life. Poor old Bill.
When the armistice was announced, the celebrations were matched by dismay at the huge loss of life. 750,000 British soldiers dead, hundreds of thousands wounded, and 80,000 victims of shell shock. Charles Carpenter returned home from France in April 1919.
I saw this tall figure striding along, and it was my dad. I just shouted hooray and ran to him. I was thrilled to bits.
Charles had an exemplary service record and had risen to the rank of sergeant. On his return, the post office promoted him to an even better job, and the carpenter's future seemed rosy.
I want to report that my bag's been stolen. We were on the beach and I just turned around for 2 seconds and my bag was... Pardon? Oh, sorry. Yes, my purse was in it and my husband's wallet. I mean, that's all of our cash. I just don't... No, because I just turned around and it... Yes, it was just taken and I don't understand and I don't really know what to do. But I only turned around for 2 seconds and it was gone.
Boom, I mean, wow. It was just so awesome, profound. No branches, no suits, just surfing off into the ether. Radical. Groovy! This is Mark Neal, part of the Smile Generation.
I'm singing hallelujah, shouting through you, that things look rosy now.
For a brief period after the First World War, it seemed Britain was indeed a land fit for heroes. The British were enjoying a post-war economic boom, and they were making the most of it.
Let's all sing hallelujah, hallelujah, that things look rosy now.
In Nottingham, Charles Carpenter was now secure in his job. The family should have been comfortable, but with 7 children to feed, it was a struggle.
My dad said I earn £560 a year, and if ever you marry a man earning as much as that, you'll do very well. But it was not enough to keep this enormous family.
Mother was very extravagant with food. I do recall times when there were awful rows because he said, you really must cut down on that grocery bill, and Mother wouldn't.
My mother had an enormous delivery each week. The butter, for instance, a great big wad of butter.
We used to have these rabbit stews with these big dumplings. Oh, and it was really mouth-watering.
But for much of the country, the economic bubble quickly burst. By 1920, there were more than 1 million men on the dole, many of them demobilized soldiers. On Armistice Day, 1921, unemployed, disabled ex-servicemen marched on the cenotaph, wearing pawn tickets instead of campaign medals. Nottingham was badly affected. Businesses folded and factories were laying men off. It was common to see men on street corners begging or tramping around the country looking for work.
I do remember my father bringing home a young man who'd been walking all day and was completely exhausted.
My mother sat him down at the table and none of us could eat our dinners. We all, one after another, we cried because this young man couldn't eat his meal. Mum got him some warm clothes on and some decent boots because he'd got to walk back to Lancashire, and gave him what money we could rake up and saw him off. We all wanted to help because this lad was starving, and we weren't. I suppose my father was lucky to have a good job.
The only thing lacking at the Carpenters was space. By 1923 there were 9 children, and the 2 up, 2 down was bursting at the seams.
At one time, when the pressure was rather great, there were 3 of us in one bed. 2 of us at the top end and 1 at the bottom. There was the washing up and the household jobs. Oh, I used to get out of them if I possibly could. I'd always got a book somewhere, behind a chair or under the table or out of the way somewhere.
But Madge's father was a strong believer in tradition. He expected the eldest daughter to help her mother with domestic chores. and this included waiting hand and foot on her two brothers.
I rebelled against it. They can do their share. Why not? And Dad said, you'll do as you're told. And I said, I won't. And he said, I'll give you a damn good hiding if you don't do as you're told. So I said, well, try it. And he did. And I hit him back. We fought, and I put both his thumbs out of joint, and he had to go to hospital.
In 1924, the family moved to a bigger house in a more prosperous area of Nottingham. Number 5 Lenton Boulevard was a 4-bedroomed house with an indoor toilet and fitted bathroom. But despite the space, Madge still caused friction in the household.
If you were in the bathroom and she wanted to be in, she told you to get out. You know, you couldn't do anything else, but you had to get out there so she could get in.
Oh yes, the bathroom was hers. If we were there, that was it. I think she ruled the roost, definitely. Bossy britches.
Now the Carpenters were prospering, there was enough spare cash for Charles to take up a hobby. And he joined an exclusive tennis club in Nottingham. Tennis had always been for the wealthy, but after the war, it was opening up to the middle classes as well.
I think tennis appealed to him because it was an up-and-coming sport, and he met people of professions that were of good standing.
Madge delighted her ambitious father by winning a scholarship to a prestigious grammar school. In those days, few people had bank accounts, so the scholarship was paid in cash. Madge went to pick up the first instalment.
I thought it was my money, and I spent it on 3 books. And my dad was furious. He said, it is not your money. I said, well, I won it. He said, no, but it is to enable me to keep you at the grammar school, you see. So I said, right, if it's your money, you can pick it up. And I refused to pick it up after that. I wouldn't go and get it. He had to go. He just had to say I got an awkward daughter.
The Carpenter children were dividing between those who succeeded and those who didn't. Unlike her sister, Joyce failed to get into grammar school. As they grew older, the gulf between the girls was getting wider.
I went to a church school in the poorer class district. The type of friends that my sisters made were of the same grammar school type. They got on better and found better jobs. I couldn't have mixed with them. No way.
I was leading a totally different existence from Joyce. Her school was different. The friends she brought in, the games she played, the activities. I still don't know what she was good at, if she was good at anything.
At grammar school, a world of opportunity was opening up to Madge. Educated women were entering science, law and medicine. And Madge began to have ambitions of her own.
When I was nearly 17, I wanted to be an artist. Well, that was what I had a gift for. And without telling my parents, I went in for a scholarship. I badly wanted to go to this art course. I very much wanted it. And it was a money scholarship, and then there was enough to take you abroad for a period abroad in studying foreign art. I was over the moon when I was told I'd got this scholarship. I was thrilled to bits.
But while Madge was celebrating her good fortune, her mother discovered she was pregnant yet again, this time with twins. Everything was fine until a few weeks before she was due to give birth.
There were some roller skates in the corridor, and she was walking along the corridor and slipped on one of them, and that brought on the premature births.
Coming home from school one day, a next door neighbour, Scotch lady I think she was, and she said, "Oh," she said, "I've got news for you." She says, "You've got twin sisters." I said, "Go on." She said, "You have?" And she says, "You can't see your mum just yet, or the babies." I went in, I was full of joy and everything. I thought it was wonderful.
Margaret came downstairs and said one baby is dying, she's not going to live long.
I did go up in the bedroom, my dad was on the bed. He was really, really, really upset. It was terrible. He says, "We've lost one of them, we've lost a sister."
She was very pretty. She looked lovely. And my dad put her in a box and put her on the back of his bicycle and took her to a place where unbaptized babies were buried.
The other twin only lived a few hours longer.
She was given the same treatment, the same funeral treatment. Dad says, "The money here is for the living. I can't afford to spend it on dead babies."
While the family were grieving for the twins, Madge suffered her own personal disappointment.
I had to turn my scholarship down. My parents couldn't let me go, and I had to leave school, stop at home, and run the house while my mother was ill.
The doctor told Alice Carpenter she needed rest. Of her surviving children, 5 were still under the age of 10. She told her eldest daughters to each pick a little sister to look after.
I chose Sheila. Sheila was the only one who became of a different standard of speech and education and behaviour from the others. It might have been because I picked her as my little one to look after.
As far as I know, Madge didn't keep her eye on me at all. That's imagination. She hated housework, she hated being in, and she hated kids.
My duty was to see that she was washed and dressed and her hair done and clean and had her school uniform and her school bag and a penny for whatever it was, seen off to school in the morning.
No. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
Nottingham Goose Fair was a great tradition in the city, dating as far back as the 1300s. Each year, travelling showmen would come from miles around to set up stalls and rides. It was something that everyone looked forward to, including the Carpenter sisters.
3 days of Goose Fair, and we always went from the time I was quite small.
Our Goose Fair, it was really something to look forward to. There was everything, you know, from the big dips, the horses and everything. And there was side shows, coconut shies and all the tombola games and that sort of thing.
Joyce always went to the Goose Fair with her sister Barbara. But one year, the girls got caught in a vicious storm.
Barbara was just a little older than me. We did everything together. slept together, went walks together. We were very, very close.
On this occasion, it rained, and it rained, and it rained. And Barbara came walking home through the wet, and she was soaked. She developed pneumonia, and this went on for some time. And then the doctor diagnosed TB.
Tuberculosis was still one of the great killers in the 1920s. There would be no vaccination against it until 1948. Barbara was immediately admitted to the Consumption Hospital in Nottingham. The wards were full of infected children, and doctors had nothing to offer their young patients except rest and fresh air, in winter as well as summer. While she was in hospital, Barbara wrote letters home to her family.
She was describing how even the water in the vases was frozen, and that when the nurse came to change the mattress, the mattress was frozen to the iron bedstead.
Although still very ill, Barbara was eventually brought home to number 5 Lenton Boulevard. To avoid contaminating the other children, her father converted the garden shed.
She was put in a lovely hut, but she was decorated nice, chintzy curtains and all, you know, lovely trimmings inside.
A little girl who'd belonged to the guides that Barbara had belonged to knocked at the door and said, in quite a loud voice, "Has the little girl died yet?" When I got rid of this kid and went in, she said to me, "I don't want to die."
The following Saturday, the rest of the children were sent off to the cinema.
I remember sitting on the open-topped tram, and Joyce saying, "Poor Barbara, she hasn't got long, and here we are going to the pictures and we won't enjoy it." When I got home, the house was deathly silent. In a happy, bustling home that I'd always known, this hit me very badly. I couldn't understand why it was so quiet.
When we came back, we told we'd lost our lovely sister.
Barbara was 15 when she died. Her parents gave her a traditional Christian burial.
In those days, everybody drew the curtains. Shops shut, if it was, because we were a well-known family. It was black, the horse-drawn black plume things on it. It was very sad, you know, when we said our goodbyes at the graveside. We lost a lovely sister, and we couldn't replace her at all. I could weep. At the moment, I could. Yes, after all these years.
You're right. If you're feeling uncomfortably bloated or suffering from painful trapped wind, try Deflatine from Rennie. It can swiftly and gently relieve the pressure without embarrassment. Take the pressure off with Deflatine from Rennie.
Watch out for the puppy impersonators. They're cute, cuddly, and you can fill them with goodies. The new Andrex Puppy Pal pouch. Get yours for $4.99 and tokens from special Andrex packs. But hurry, they're going fast.
Save up to £200 in the central heating summer sale from British Gas. Call 0345 450 450 now, or look out for this leaflet.
And another thing, that dome. What's the point of that then, eh? Blooming great marquee. Wouldn't waste me time going. Apparently, I've heard...
If you've got a mind of your own, take it to the dome.
Attitudes to courting changed dramatically after World War I. Chaperoning young women wherever they went was a thing of the past, and new dance halls became popular places to meet potential partners. And by the late 20s, Joyce and Madge Carpenter were both courting, under the suspicious eye of their father.
We were watched like goodness knows what. Had to be in by a certain time and account for everything. And quite a few lies got told as well.
My dad just stood behind the door at 9 o'clock to make sure we were in. Hello, Dad, are you there? Because you see, Arthur used to like to bring me in and have a kiss and a cuddle. But we couldn't do that when my dad was there. Oh dear, Dad, if you only knew.
Arthur Humber was the love of Joyce's life. They met in a Nottingham park, a regular haunt for the Carpenter girls.
We used to go there every Sunday. We watched the brass band. This one day I was with my school pal and a voice behind me said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Oh yes, please." And a lovely big arm came and picked me up and we got chatting and he said, "Well, I'd like to take you home but not your friend." So I said, "So would you mind?" So off she went and they walked me home. That's how our romance started. I was 14, nearly 15. We did sing songs to one another, and there was a special one that Arthur did sing to me. Was it a dream we were alone, and you were in my arms last night? Was it a dream? Was it a dream we made alone? We went for long walks along the canal side. We used to stop and have a cuddle under a bridge, remembering we'd got to be back for 9 o'clock.
But Arthur was a working-class lad from a mining village outside Nottingham, and Joyce's parents disapproved of their relationship.
It was class distinction, definitely. The others had gone for different type of fella. Perhaps they had better schooling, they'd have finished up as school teachers, and Arthur was a door-to-door salesman.
I thought Arthur was crude, uneducated, ill-mannered, and I didn't like him. It wasn't until the end of his life, when we both calmed down a bit, that I really accepted him.
His speech was a little crude, to put it mildly. He obviously had been brought up in a home where swear words were acceptable.
It wasn't bad language anyway. I mean, I can swear when I want. No, I didn't consider it bad language. I mean, I've got to say it, I think we're a stuffy family.
Madge had fallen for someone very different. Charles Wheeler was intelligent and from a middle-class background. And Madge was in love.
It was instantaneous. I saw him and fell for him, right off. And when he took me home, and Mum said, what are you grinning at? And I said, I've just met the man I'm going to marry. And she said, oh, does he know? And I said, yes, he knows. And he did. He knew the same as I did, right off, bang off.
Yes, yes, my baby said yes, yes.
We used to go very long walks. We used to have a bit of a snog, but that's as far as it went.
Whilst Charles Wheeler became a favourite with Madge's parents, Arthur was still struggling to impress them.
I remember Arthur being at one of the evening parties, and I think they were playing cards all night, and he really was doubled up with pain, and Mother said, do you think it's appendicitis? And Arthur kept on saying no, but in the end he did collapse. And it was because he needed to break wind, and had been too afraid to do so.
A few days later, Joyce came home to find that her treasured photo of Arthur was missing.
I said, where's Arthur's photo? My mum says it's been put in a place that he thoroughly deserves. And he says, oh, you'll have to go and find it. And I had to look everywhere. And of course, when I went to the loo myself, and there it was, in the loo. And I was very distressed, I can tell you. I'm not very pleased with my mum. But she always stuck to her guns that Arthur wasn't good enough for me. And well, why put his photo in the toilet? Photo hadn't done any harm, had it?
But although Charles Wheeler had seemed the perfect match for Madge, it wasn't long before she realised he'd been keeping a secret from her.
When I met him, I didn't even know he was a Catholic. And he kept it back from me for some considerable time.
The long-running troubles in Ireland had brought religious tension to England, and Catholics, with their lavish displays of worship, were often treated with suspicion. When Madge's father discovered Charles was Catholic, his attitude towards him changed.
The idea of my marrying a Catholic infuriated him. Charles used to call for me on Sunday mornings, and we'd go off for the day. And he used to say, "Here's that creeping Jesus again."
But Madge was determined to marry Charles and agreed to take instruction in the Catholic faith. Madge being Madge, her teachers got more than they bargained for.
I went to a very nice little priest, but you will be astounded to hear it. He had a nervous breakdown. So they sent me to another one who had an unbroken list of converts. You know what happened to him? He dropped dead. And I had a special dispensation.
In line with Catholic teaching, Madge and Charles behaved themselves during their courtship.
We didn't have any sex before marriage. It was something I didn't know about, and nobody had told me anything about. When I first heard where babies came from, I thought, it's not possible. How can that happen? So I stood over a mirror and had a look, and I still wasn't very enlightened, no.
The cinema had become a popular venue for courting couples. many young people had their first sexual experiences in the back row of the pictures. And public outrage led to the introduction of usherettes armed with torches. But Joyce and Arthur found a rather more comfortable location.
His mum and dad went away, and we spent the weekend in their bed. Yeah, that's where it happened. And the milkman knew as well.
Little did Joyce know that her weekend of fun would have serious repercussions.
I was violently sick every morning, morning sickness, but I didn't know that went with being pregnant. And then my mum said, "Has Arthur been doing things to you?" You see, and of course it all come out. My name was Mud, I think.
It was a very shameful thing to have a baby before you were married. A dreadful thing. The social stigma was fantastic.
Before Joyce's pregnancy became too obvious, her parents hastily arranged a wedding.
I don't know how long I'd gone, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and I had a miscarriage, see, and Mum said she wouldn't trust me anymore, so we went on with the marriage.
Joyce's parents came grudgingly to the wedding, which was held in a registry office.
Anyway, after that, we just cleared off and we went into town and we finished up at the Hippodrome at night, went to the pictures. Oh, we were two naughty kids, we were.
By the late 20s, people were taking their leisure time to new extremes. Anything went. With the growth of aviation, air shows became all the rage, especially amongst bored housewives. With her elder children married or working, Alice Carpenter now had the time and money to have some fun of her own, along with the younger children.
The first time I went up in a plane, of course I was very frightened. I didn't know, I thought the plane might fall down, you know, crash, or I didn't look very much out of the window. But Mum, she used to love it.
I think one of the things that my mother really enjoyed was meeting these airmen. They were always courteous, they were willing to sign her autograph book, and if they flattered her in any way or form, this was an extra thrill. And I think they did have that look of heroes about them.
She liked going up in aeroplanes. I never had any understanding of this because I would be terrified. I'd forgotten about this habit of my mother's of going up in aeroplanes with strange men.
There was a birdman. He wore a webbed suit, and he really did jump from the planes. And I've got his autograph. He signed it for me. And when we got home, Mother was so jealous that she altered the Miss Carpenter to Mrs. So there's a big blob where Miss is written. Because she felt it was her album, and he ought to have put to Mrs. Carpenter, not to Miss Carpenter.
But although Alice was out and about having fun at the air shows, at home her marriage was going through a rocky patch.
My father was quite a ladies' man. She probably knew he was having an affair.
Mother was quite sure there was someone at the office that was making eyes at Father.
She told me that he used to come home and she says there was no love there at all, that she'd thought he'd stopped loving her.
She told me that Dad had got another woman and there was a child, a little girl. She was crying and upset. She was in her 40s, and this other woman was a young woman. I couldn't envisage any other woman taking my mother's place. It didn't seem possible, no.
Charles Carpenter did remain with his wife. But when he died some 40 years later, a photograph of a little girl was discovered in his wallet. The family assumed she was his illegitimate daughter, the half-sister they never met. In next week's A Family Century, the difficult relationship between Charles Carpenter and his son Bill ends tragically.
It's one of those that's a secret in the family, I think. Yeah, it's not talked about.
Madge faces anguish over an extraordinary hospital mistake. Her baby is mixed up at birth, and no one will believe her.
I'd got a baby that I'd got to look after, and another woman had gone off with my baby.
And for the first time in her life, dutiful daughter Sheila defies her parents.
Part 2 of